My name is Lisa Beth Lentini Walker, and along with my co-founder, Dan Ayala, we began MentorCore in the middle of all of this crazy time because we wanted to make sure that there was a place for compliance and risk professionals to connect without any questions about whether they were going to be sold to or vendors or anything like that. So this is just a very free space for us to learn together. We've been doing these events pretty regularly, about once a week for months now. And I couldn't be more excited to have Bill Hoffman with us today. Bill is someone that I have looked up to for a long time. I met him first at Best Buy many moons ago, but we actually happened to share a common alma mater, although I don't believe that we were at the school at the same time. It was just another connecting point. So, Bill, welcome to MentorCore today.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
We're going to be talking about analytics and what an amazing space. And there are so many more demands right now for compliance and risk professionals to incorporate data analytics, artificial intelligence into our jobs, but a lot of us struggle with how to do that. So let's start this out with, tell me a little bit about you. Actually, tell all of our listeners a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of being at the intersection of data and research and analytics and decision making for my whole career. So I started my career. I was at CIA for 7 years as an intelligence officer. Learned a ton about the power of getting the right information to the right person at the right time to enable a good decision, and what happens on the flip side if that doesn't happen, which in that case was really bad. But businesses, not the same level of downside risk, but very similar situations where if we aren't understanding what's going on with our customer or with the market or our competitors, we can make bad decisions. And I really enjoyed helping companies try to make good decisions, at least have the fact base to enable those. Had a chance, as we mentioned, to be colleagues at Best Buy, where I led the insights and analytics functions there. Did the same thing for US Bank, and I've been CEO of Tradecraft Insights, our company, for several years now, really helping others build out their analytics functions and help hopefully some of their internal clients make good decisions. So from the upper Midwest, I've been in Minneapolis with my wife Gina and our 3 kids, Haley, Joan, and Luke, since 2006. Out in Lakeville here. So love it up here, and super excited to share any things to consider and also pitfalls to avoid on your journey with analytics here today, and look forward to a bunch of great questions.
So one of the things that I know about you that you didn't really bring up was that you are a prior service member, and thank you for your service. And I know that you also have an initiative to give back to veterans. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so had a chance to serve in the U.S. Naval Reserve, joined after 9/11 and did that for 9.5 years, and really learned a ton about practical application of insights and analytics. I was an intelligence officer, so very similar work to what I had done for the agency prior to that. And Vetalytics is an effort I started in 2018 to try to help companies be able to provide time that their folks have for corporate social responsibility time. Usually a lot of companies are offering a day or two of paid CSR time per year, and asking companies with their analytics teams to devote some of that kind of mental capacity toward veterans causes. So things like questions like, how do we optimize the VA kind of outpatient doctor network in a region based upon the needs of vets in that region? Like, there's a ton of available data on vets, but not many people are tapping into it beyond some government agencies who quite frankly need help with being best practice on some of these topics. So if there's folks out there interested in helping at your companies or just personally, please get in touch with me. I try to just connect up people, and also helping people, or trying to help people with roles. We hired a lot of vets at US Bank. I know Best Buy is a big supporter
Yellow
of
Ribbon Company.
definitely,
Yeah.
and others out here too. So anything I can do to connect people up with different types of roles, or help, if you have a passion for it, I'm definitely interested in helping build a bridge there for anybody.
That's fantastic. So, as you started your journey into data analytics, what's changed over the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years?
Yeah. It's surprising. Like, I was doing, I'm part of this group called Data Leaders, and we do a bunch of masterclass events for European executives around data and analytics and how to drive insights and actual business value or company value if you're a nonprofit or organization from data and analytics. And it was one of the founders has been in the space, 40 years. I've been in it maybe 20, 25. And he was mentioning how similar the topics are, even though it's 15 years and there's a lot different versus then AI, ML, other tools. The challenges are still very much the same, and they're really around the human factors. So what I like to say is, in a stable, static, kind of certain environment, data and analytics is an IT challenge. In the typical world, in particular right now, where it's fast moving, it's uncertain, things are changing quickly. It's not just an IT problem, it's really a change management problem. So more data available than ever. In fact, more data created in the last 5 years than in all of human history up to that point. That means to think about that. That's like a tectonic shift, and so that's like the information age is now into the analytics age. But how many of us are really using what we have in terms of data on our competitors, our customers, on our, how do we engage employees? We're not, right? We're just scratching the surface. And it's not more data or more technology tools or more analytics or AI and ML that is a panacea that's going to solve all the problems. It's actually, do people want to use it? How do you understand biases to action? And how do you disseminate the insights out to people at the right time so they can make a decision and then they want to make a decision? And those human factors are the things that still a major problem in this space 20 years ago and today as well.
Right. Totally understandable. And I know that you've been writing a little bit about what data analysts need to think about in this next normal. So
Yeah,
talk to me a little bit about this huge shift. Obviously, right, the pandemic has changed buying behaviors. It's changed
right.
living behaviors, cooking, all of these different shifts going on. How do you navigate through that, and what's your best advice for clients and customers?
Got it. That's a great question. So I like to start this one with a quote. I'm not a Yankees fan, but from a famous New York Yankee, Yogi Berra, who said, "The future is just not what it used to be."
Right.
And like many of his quotes, it's actually eerily prescient with what's going on. So I mean, my philosophy is that COVID-19 hasn't changed everything, but it's changed enough. It's changed enough things that I don't know if there's a new normal or next normal or we get back to total normal, but there's still things that are different. The fact that we're doing this, for example, via Zoom is one of those examples.
Right.
So to me, what's really facing professionals around data and analytics is that a lot of the great work that's gone into, for example, building a model and training that model over time. So trying to understand what's the next best product or service to offer customer in segment A, B, or C, right? Like a pretty typical marketing analytics case. The models that were used to train or to answer that question were trained on data that in many cases for companies is developed over months, maybe even years or even decades, right? So, and they can get they can get quite accurate over time because you're learning more about your customer, their interactions with you. So with COVID though, a lot of those models are defunct is too strong, but they're not applicable. Things have changed enough where you can't just say, hey, our shopping model is now the same as it was before COVID because people aren't shopping in stores, they're shopping in a more multi-channel way. We've basically accelerated the digital transformation for most companies that was going to take 5 years that happened in 3 months. That's some data
That's
from
that's
McKinsey.
like, I mean, honestly,
Yeah,
mind blowing. And from a
yeah,
compliance perspective, I'm
yeah,
like, oh no,
right,
like you
right,
can't stop this. How do we fix
totally.
the things that are wrong?
Right. How do you keep up with that? I mean, think about that. Literally 5 years of digital transformation, the expectation of dollars shifting from multiple industries into digital channels happened in 3 months. So, and necessity is the mother of all invention. So we're figuring it out. We always get through it. But some of the risks that come along with that probably are not yet contemplated or even thought through. So the bottom line is that a lot of the assumptions about what data and analytics would, could, and should do have changed. And the only way to really know what's next is by having our listening ears on, like really paying attention, like being extra careful about market research and competitive intelligence and analytics on your customer and what's going on with the regulatory environment, like just the sense making, the ability to understand what's going on outside of the four walls of your company And then also potentially tapping insights from your employees who, who knows more about what's changing with the customer than the people who talk to them every day about how they're changing. I mean, like, the companies don't think about that as a source of good insights, and employees are a tremendous source of good insights. Have to be careful and do it the right way, but they have a ton of good insight. So bottom line on this is, companies that really don't have robust data and analytics functions are actually at a distinct advantage right now, because they don't have to unlearn all the stuff that got them to where they were.
Huh. That's
And
interesting.
if you're just starting out, like, I know the kind of data and analytics space applied to compliance, some companies like banks have been excelling at it for many years. Others are new to it. It's not a disadvantage. It's actually, I think, an advantage to not have kind of have more of a blank slate approach to it, than having to relearn, or starting with that unlearn process, which takes time. So
Right.
not everything's changed. Enough has changed, but sense making capabilities, having your listening ears on and paying attention has mattered always, but never more than right now.
Right. So you touched on a really interesting topic, and I know that we've got a number of people in the compliance space who are listening to this now, and will likely be listening to it later when we put it up on our Vimeo channel. But the Department of Justice came out, and none of this is terribly, terribly new, but their latest guidance said, hey, compliance should be using data analytics, and they should be using it to enhance their programs. And many compliance professionals and legal professionals said, whoa, I didn't get into this for numbers, and I didn't get into this because I understand data analytics. So there is a little bit of a scramble going on. What can you tell me about how compliance professionals, how legal professionals should think about the use of data analytics, and what's the best way to connect with someone who knows about data analytics so that you can get a little bit smarter? Like, what language should we be using, and what drivers are there for people who are in data analytics functions? That's like
Yeah.
5 questions, but
It's all good ones though. I'll do my best to cover, but let me know if I miss any of them. So
sure.
I think, really to start, the concept that, you know, small data is better than small, like, actionable data is better than big clunky data. So again, whether it's you have, an Excel spreadsheet with information on 50 partners, customer, like, you don't have to have, like, there's this, like, um, I call it, like, the tyranny of tech thinking, like the idea that you have to have a massive IT implementation, or the latest, R or Python programmer, or PhD in data scientist from MIT, like, to do anything with data and analytics, is a false premise. And it's designed by people who are trying to sell you those products and services. And of course, if you can go hire 3 MIT PhDs in data science all day, go do that, right? Not a lot of us can do that. So how do we start to leverage in a deeper way what we have already? And to me, that all starts with the power of a good question. My favorite all-time quote from any management prognosticator or someone in the space is from Peter Drucker. And he said, this is from, I think, the late 80s, early 90s, but still very relevant today. He said, the main problem with management teams today is that they have all the answers, but they have all the questions wrong. So if you know what the key things to answer, like, if you have the right questions, you don't need a lot of data to answer them. You need to make sure it's triangulated, something I learned in the intelligence community, right? Like, you can't just take one source and say, yeah, that's it. In fact, a lot of people do that, and it creates bad outcomes. But thinking through if you're a small company or even a big one with very kind of nascent or just starting analytics or kind of sense making capabilities, you're going to have some data on your customers, your employees, your partners. You're going to have some research. You're going to look at all secondary research out there, what's going on in your industry. There's so much out there to start with that doesn't require 3 PhDs from MIT. And the other part I think that's really good with the compliance, legal, kind of regulatory space generally, is you all have had to do a good job of selling what you're doing with your internal constituents, like trying to get people to see that, hey, we really have to pay attention to this thing, because you may not think it's important now, but in 6 months when it bites you in the you're going to think it matters. So we might as well get ahead of it. So that, like, the mechanics and the internal processes you've built, so things like data governance, et cetera, can be good platforms by which to drive change, even if you're scratching the surface of, like, a few percentage points of analysis on the data you have. If you have the pipes out to the organization based upon what you've done on other topics with risk, compliance, legal, regulatory, use those same pipes to flow data and analytics findings into your internal constituents. Because to do this right, there's really 4 steps. You have to know what the right questions are. You have to collect data to support an answer to that question. You have to analyze it, and then you have to disseminate that out to people who need the answers to the questions. That's all this business is, whether it's intelligence, insights, analytics, call it whatever you want, research, blah, blah, blah. That's it. So a lot of people are good at collecting and analyzing, but they're not good at scoping questions, and they're not good at disseminating it. And I would argue that a lot of people on the Zoom right now probably are good at the bookends, the starting point and the end point. So that's actually enough to start with. So bottom line, small data, think about it, it's actionable. Come up with a few use cases based upon the questions that you feel are really important to answer and that you can answer relatively quickly, let's say in a quarter, and start building momentum. Show what's possible, data and analytics, convince your internal constituents to continue to invest in the capability and build it out over time. And the key is just get going, like just start. Don't feel like you have to wait for some magical IT transformation to happen, because you'll be waiting a long time if you wait for that.
Seems to be a recurring theme for many
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So we got a question in the chat that says, um, do you have any specific examples of how you can use something like expense claim data to look for risk or otherwise enhance compliance programs? I know that a lot of vendors in the compliance space talk about being able to identify potential problems through training by seeing who's having problems answering questions. But to me, that's always seemed a little bit rudimentary and reflective of whether someone actually has a problem or is just a terrible test taker. So what are your thoughts? Like, have you seen anything where you can get early signals on, aberrant behavior that's seeming to change over time?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the in the intelligence community, it's kind of trying to identify what was called chatter. So like looking for asymmetric spikes in normal behavioral patterns that can lead to things like an indication of some sort of upcoming threat or opportunity. And in the business side, it's the same thing. So usually with a lot of the technology platforms that are behind things like expense reporting, you can actually put decision rules in to say, hey, alert manager if spend level is plus or minus 15% from typical behavior, right? And there could be some good cases for that. So probably declining now, given not a lot of travel. But being able to put flags in the system, then I would try to, it's a fine line, because you don't want to have your employees feel like you're spying on them, but you also want to look at the data and make sure that people are following the rules. So I think it's just being very transparent about the approach, and then for people who, if they're out of the zone of tolerance, whatever you want to call it, then maybe giving them a soft nudge that isn't a draconian first step to say, hey, by the way, we saw your spend's up, can you just maybe give me a reason why? And then maybe they mention it either to the system as a note, or they're passing it on directly to their manager or whoever is the right kind of contact for that. So I would start with the soft part of it. And then on the flip side, like a couple of the clients that we've leveraged we have relationships with have leveraged this capability on the flip side of that, which is opportunity identification. So, if you're a sales professional and you're out there talking to, let's say, 30 to 50 commercial banking clients about particular, loan needs, et cetera, like you're logging a lot of notes, or you're even emailing, and there's so many tools now that can be like, hey, have you said you were going to contact this person, have you reached out to them? Or so like just this, as a former colleague of mine at US Bank called it, automagically flowing in decision rules into the normal course of your day, whether it's for risk protection or for opportunity identification. And a lot of the systems, like, we deployed Einstein from Salesforce, like we're able to kind of surface these flags that allow the person who needs that information to do a better job of what they're doing already. So to me, like, the A in AI is not artificial, it's actually augmented. Like you're augmenting a human being with better
Interesting.
insights. So I think that those are some
I
of the
like
ways.
that. I really
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
it's,
And
go ahead.
automatic magically sounds just like it's almost like a dream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it comes like it's obviously from the Disney reference. I like the magic bands, and we're actually heading down there for a vacation. We're gonna brave the try to get back to some level of normal, and just the idea that they've done such a good job of like automating in a non-scary, non-creepy sort of way, like normal, what you would normally do at Disney World. Like it's just now easier because you just use your Magic Band, which by the way is tracking every single step you take across the entire experience you have. So the amount of data collected in that is probably scary if you think about it in abstract, but you're okay with it because it's helping you and your experience get better. So I think for all these things, whether it's expense tracking or opportunity identification, there has to be this bridge so people see that it's good for them, whether it's the customer, whether it's the employee, whether it's a potential prospect that you want to do business with. Like you have to make sure you're doing this in a way that really is enabling that person to feel like this is helping them do what they do, not trying to like automate it in a way that's going to have them lose their job, or that's draconian. It has to be something that they can buy into to be effective, I think.
Yeah, and that's always hard on the compliance side because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't like following rules.
Right.
So that is something that we always struggle with. And we also struggle with, the fact that a lot of people in clients also have an ethics role. And so there's always questions about the ethics of data collection and data usage and the privacy implications of that.
Totally.
So,
Lisa, you
I
were
know,
breaking
and
up a little bit.
is different. It does gather. What's that out? Sorry about that.
No
Can you hear me
worries.
now?
I can, yeah. I missed the last maybe 10 seconds though.
Okay. So one of the things that we've talked about is how you connect with people in the data analytics world. Are there? I know that there are terms like Python and Tableau and everything like that. How much do you need to know about that to be able to connect with practitioners in this space? And how do you, ask for help without seeming like you have no idea what they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would start by asking them what they in service of what. So if someone, you're talking to someone who's an R and Python programmer, a nice way to start is like, hey, can you tell me like how you applied that in whatever business case? Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's customer. Because I think oftentimes you don't have to know the R code or the SQL Server or whatever the Azure AWS platform it's landing on to be able to have a good relationship with your data and analytics folks and to aim and direct them. So part of it will just be for them too. Like I think that's another thing to consider is if you're working to build a relationship with your company's data and analytics folks, they don't know any more about your space than you know about theirs, right? So this
Very
idea
true.
of um, focusing on context and then translation is the next wave. Like a lot of people are building out their capabilities, but they have data scientists who don't know how to aim their skill set at what the customer or internal clients needs would be. So I think it's a lot of education, a lot of things like learns at lunch, maybe doing a state of the regulatory state of affairs on a quarterly basis, or asking analysts to come in and talk about what's the state of the consumer this quarter. Just kind of building the bridges, having things like a monthly community of practice around analytics,
Hmm.
just simple stuff. Like don't overcomplicate it. More conversations, the better. And just really building a relationship. Virtual coffees, actual coffees, getting to know the analytics team, and don't feel like you have to be an expert to have a conversation. And oftentimes there could be a little bit of that um, academic kind of veneer, but it goes away quickly when people start to see that like you're interested in what they're doing, what they have to say, and how they're using analytics. And then once you share, hey, we have a case that might be interesting relative to that work. Have you thought about this? If you can get people on the analytics side who are excited how they can deploy their craft, that will hook them. I mean, they want to solve problems. They want to give you good answers. They want to know that it matters what they're doing. They don't always get that from some of their internal clients. So if you can provide that to them, you can build a strong relationship over time.
Absolutely. So this is really, really a challenge that also has. is part of your task with doing is identifying bad behavior and following up with it. The Department of Guidance indicate that access to data analytics and data analysts was one of the key elements. So your proposal does go a long way in access data analytics
Right.
and to the analysts in question. Um, so other than that, are there any other ways that you would propose that compliance can do better outreach to people in the data analytics space, or say even, hey, you know what, we haven't been doing any data analytics as a company, but I need that data and some help. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, great question. So I would
And
put
what would you
the
look for?
awesome. I would say that like if you're working to get bandwidth from analytics professionals in the team, they most likely have 400 requests, and it like you may be 82 on the list, right? Like, so how do you get to three?
And
So
not
helping them,
let's be clear, not regenerative.
right,
Compliance is generally not revenue generative.
right. But like what you do have is the ability, which is even better in many cases, is to prevent hard dollar loss. So what we would do, for
Mhm.
example, within U.S. Bank, the prioritization criteria was balanced. It was balanced on revenue growth, on net operating profit, and including cost or risk avoidance. So try to have the analytics criteria truly reflect what the strategy of the company is. That will be a balance of those things. It's not just all upside without any concern about headline risk in the Wall Street Journal, right? Like you have to balance that out. So as long as you can document and work with the analytics team so they see what their time is spent on is actually highly valuable to the company, that's the key to getting their time, because they're going to need to show, hey, we had limited resources. Did we work on the right stuff? And be able to show, yeah, we had to do this because X, Y, and Z, and make it clear to folks. I think that there tends to be friction though. And I've seen it with my team. I've seen it with clients between analytics and compliance. And a lot of that has to do with things like, as you mentioned, Lisa, about like data access. Like it can be, I think sometimes analytics professionals view data as like this, it's like air. So it's like, oh, I don't need these restrictions because I gotta have this now to get my job done. And you're just getting in the way. When in reality, like if you aren't careful, one data leak and that whole team is fired, right? Like, so like they need to understand that it's important to protect customer data and, PII and card data, all the stuff you guys know extremely well. So what I would do, the frustrating part, I think for a lot of people in the analytics teams I've worked with, when hearing it's when you get the edict on high without the context, or there's not this two-way street. So for example, one of the ways that with our compliance partners at US Bank that I thought they were really good at was, hey, here's what we're trying to do, and then inviting our team in to help with the solution. So not saying do it these 7 ways, but show what the goal is, and then say, hey, how would you guys attack that problem? How would you solve that? And then having it be the analytics team's idea, even though it wasn't, that helped us really with our compliance partners create quite a bit of traction. And in the places where it was truly an edict on high, and there was like, just do it this way because we've always done it that way, people are not happy about that. There was not an emotional engagement with that approach versus the other folks that were very happy to take points of view on how to do it right. And I think that's just human nature, right? If you're part of the solution, it's easier to get people's engagement and time on the solution.
Right. And I think there's a lot of selling that compliance needs to do on regularly. It's all part of how you communicate effectively.
Totally.
Um, so I mean, I see this all the time. Now, one of the things you said earlier on was that sometimes you have to ask the right question.
Yeah.
When you're working with data analytics, how do you figure out what the right question is? Is this a collaborative process, or is compliance supposed to come up with all the right questions?
No, it should be highly collaborative. And that is when you look at the analytics teams that have done a good job at companies and help them become distinctive in this new kind of analytics driven or data driven age versus those that are really good at solving whatever, but they don't know like they have no business context, they don't add a lot of value. So having a highly collaborative two-way conversation with the analytics team about what matters and why is incredibly important. That's why when we've done this work for clients, we really focus on this concept of translation. So you
Mhm.
having an analytics translator, someone who potentially from the analytics team is sitting with the compliance team for a week or two just to understand like what's happening and why their analytics would be needed, how it would be influencing the business as a result, and vice versa. So we in past roles for Best Buy, for example, we would have some of our analytics translators like embedded in the business, literally sitting outside of the office of the general manager for a business group, as an example. And that's important for multiple reasons, because like knowing what the right questions are is incredibly important. But so is knowing the importance of those questions, and very importantly, how they change over time. Because the question you thought was important 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago may not be important anymore. Yet the analytics team is churning and burning on the work. So
Right.
how do you balance out what matters most? And just the more linkages, the more meetings, the more and not to have a meeting, but like baking this kind of two-way conversation into your existing business rhythms. The more the more translation, the more conversation that happens, the better outcomes for everybody involved and the most optimal use of time. So standing meetings would be something I would leverage, and then make them real. Like don't just fill them up with stuff. Like be very transparent about what's working, what's not. Sorry, one last thing, because it's such an
Right.
important topic. Another thing that you should think about is it's a military concept called an AAR, or after action report. There's tons of press and cases
Mhm.
out there, given that it's military, like non-classified. It's all out there on the approach. Highly recommend it, because what you do is, like, for example, you did a project with the analytics team on a compliance topic. After it's done, we usually go, okay, on to the next thing. We never look back in the mirror for like a percent or two of our time and say, what can we learn from that? Like what worked, what didn't, why did things go well, why did they not go well, and what should we do differently next time? Those 5 questions are incredibly sources of incredible insights. Just have to spend a little time looking back, so you can learn a lot from your past efforts and get better each time.
So, spend a couple more minutes on after action reports. They're very common in information security when you have an incident. What are some of the questions that you answer in that after action report? Because
Yeah,
I don't know that it is as common amongst compliance or ethics practitioners.
that's a great topic. And typically it would be those five. It's like, what worked, what didn't, why did it work, why did it not work, which is usually about like what were the enablers and what were the things that got in the way. And then very importantly, what would we do differently next time? And that has to be, a lot of times people who are doing those, maybe those forms or a very kind of rote approach to the security incident type model, it's their point of view, but there's not the dialogue. So I would encourage you to have the key stakeholders in the room, from the person who did the analytics to the end client to you, and how you enabled that all together. And a half hour, make it quick. Maybe get lunch, or we can all get back in person. Just coffee, like make it light, a light like Chatham House rules. What's said here stays here. But we're just trying to get better for the next one. So you keep it very open, and then you're learning from it. Like you're not just having the meeting, because oftentimes this would happen too, where you have a meeting but you forget to take notes, or like remember, oh yeah, I remember we thought that, but you aren't actually showing the benefit of it. So you have to focus on it being collaborative, take action off of it, document it, and then you have a collection of best practices. Like what you're really learning is how to avoid future barriers and how to enable future best practices, that those things become highly leverageable, and then you just show the benefits of having the conversation. And it is time investment, there's no doubt, but it's worth it, and it'll help you prevent future mistakes and optimize your time going forward.
And I know we're getting some comments in the chat. There's at least one of the listeners who does use after action reports on all big projects,
Cool.
even if something didn't go wrong.
Yeah,
Um,
great
so,
point.
one of the other concepts that you brought up earlier was triangulation and
Yeah,
how to differentiate chatter from, you know, actually big things. Tell me
yeah.
a little bit more about the how you do that and what those mean.
Cool. Yeah. So a good example, and this was something that I think folks who may be in retail or environments that have a lot of customer facing employees might feel, where the typical thing would be, and you'll remember this from Best Buy days, Lisa Beth, like be in the past, let's say the president of the stores division at Best Buy would go out and talk to 5 GMs, general managers of stores across the, a region. And they would often come back with, I can't believe this is happening, or we're missing this big opportunity, because they spoke with, it's confirmation bias. They spoke with 5 people who had a point of view, which was incredibly important, not to minimize their contribution and their engagement, super important. But the 5 GMs weren't representative of the other 1,195. Just because you spoke to 5 didn't mean you had a representative sample and what you knew was happening out there. So viewing that one source of intelligence or insight as a clue. So it's you're clue finding now. You have a clue. So we heard from 5, just to use a practical example, we heard from 5 general managers that customers really were frustrated by their protection that we're selling them on their new iPhone. Okay, so do you go back to Apple and say, guys, fix it? Or do you want to maybe confirm that first? So what we would do in that case is we would launch an ad hoc market research effort. So we'd go talk to customers about this. We would maybe do an employee focus group, and we try to get different geographies, different backgrounds, different types of stores. So you're trying to find out if this is an isolated incident or a truly systemic issue that we need to really focus on. And if yes, great. If not, then imagine the amount of time you've wasted if it wasn't a big deal. And then same thing on the opportunity. Hey, we think we have a new product innovation opportunity here. You build something out, you spend millions of dollars, but you didn't do your customer research. Therefore, you roll it out and nothing happens. So you've got to view these breadcrumbs as clues, but triangulation means being able to take these insights from multiple different sources. So much like intelligence community, you do like human intelligence, imagery intelligence, signals intelligence, et cetera. Hopefully not rumor intelligence, which seems to be the topic du jour of the intelligence community of late. But like actually, like getting insights from what's happening. So market research, competitive insights, strategic insights, customer data, changes in behavior, like, and putting those things together and then having a story. Like the other part, like that's the necessary but not sufficient condition. Like you have a lot of great insights, and now you need to focus on, okay, what's the story? What's the what? What's the so what? What's the now what? What are we going to do about it? And making that all clear for your end user. Not an easy task, but you can work with your partners across research, analytics, et cetera, to get that job done for your key executives and also frontline employees, who, if you can get it out to them, that's even more important than the CEO and or direct reports.
So I've got about 3 more questions right now
Cool.
in the hopper, and I want to let anybody know that if you have questions and you're listening to this, please feel free to include that in either the chat or the Q&A. My first question is culture. So right now, particularly around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a lot of other types of topics, and ethics, there's been a lot of discussion around measuring culture within an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on how data analytics can be helpful to that, in addition to doing surveys? Because I think sometimes people answer surveys, but that may not be their actual behavior.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important question. So one thing, back to the U.S. Bank example, it's a good one. So the challenge for U.S. Bank was, broadening out the level of diversity in mid to senior level executive ranks at the company, and they were, very good at the front lines up to certain level. But the challenge, and this is 4 or 5 years ago, and I think they've accomplished this mission already, was to broaden that out. And part of it was, having intentional focus of D&I as like a core pillar of the value system in the company. But that's not, and people often do that, but that's not enough. Like you need to have that, you need to have executives championing it, but it's also good to have some hard data to back the case up. So what we would do is help working with our human resources partners and just the internal teams broadly, is actually identify the value. So looking at work group level responses and saying, hey, if we had let's say a minority senior leader, they were recruiting other senior, mid-level to senior level minority leaders in their work group at a higher level than non-work groups with that case. And then comparing things like employee engagement, comparing revenue, profitability, like all the stuff that matters to your company, whatever those metrics are, most likely the environment, if it's one that's encouraging employees to bring their full self to work and there's a lot of engagement, you're probably going to get better outcomes. But if you can't tell the story and show that, then it's harder to build the case for those initiatives at a very like visceral level with the employee base. But showing the executive team, yes, like these, we're able to retain our employees, and not just those who are in diverse backgrounds, but everybody. Like there's better performance for everybody. Like so, just being able to use data to tell the story. Now, it's important too, though, that it doesn't always, the best laid plans don't always work out. And thankfully, I've not had this case, but you have to have an objective point of view. So if there are things that you learn that aren't, going the way that the executive team, and not necessarily a D&I case, but just generally, like we're launching this brand new awesome strategy we know is going to work. Like you have to have the intestinal fortitude and courage to be like, guys, like, gals, it's not. Do we know it's working? Like, have we done the math on that? And that's I think the biggest challenge that we all have in compliance space and analytics is that kind of we have to be the voice of reason and an objective point of view, because there just aren't that many other parts of the organizations that provide that. And if we don't do it, then who will? So using data analytics and kind of that compliance risk in a way that is helping provide the guardrails for how companies are moving forward in the right way, super powerful, and can help not only companies stay out of a lot of trouble, but also do the right things for their employees and their customers. And those are pretty darn good outcomes.
Yeah, I always like to make sure that we're providing a gut check and that, I call what we do in our profession being the guardians, right?
Yep.
We're the ones who come to the table and say, is this really, like, I know you can do this, but is this really a good idea? And are you actually going to get the outcomes without the bad side effects at the end of the day? So let's have a discussion about where is the risk in this and what's the threshold that we're willing to tolerate.
Yeah, that is such a key point, in particular for analytics professionals who, again, back to more data available than ever. But to your point about just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think a big part of the solution for companies there is inviting the customer into it's a balance between, like, you don't want to be creepy or scary, but you want to be helpful with the data. So what's the right balance? And like using technology tools like offer management or others that help you understand, hey, I'm okay getting 7 emails from this brand because I love that brand. I'm happy to find out the latest and greatest all the time. Or this other brand, I'm like, I don't really want to hear from you. Stop sending me emails. Like,
Mhm.
you have to be able to say, hey, how many emails would you like? Did you like this email? Or do you want more or less? Like, there are ways to just go ask the customer and find out, so that you have the appropriate balance. And it depends on the culture, depends upon the customer base. But, if you can personalize the level of kind of data value exchange, that can go a long way. And if you get that wrong, obviously people can get very mad at you very quickly. So you've got to be careful with the data you have. It's precious. It's precious for sure.
Right. And, I know that we all struggle with that because we're all trying to kind of maintain our brand, whether we own a business or it's our own personal brand. So, one of the other questions I had was in a couple of roles that I've had, I've done kind of a voice of the customer of compliance. So, talking to the people that rely on the function in their regular course of business. Now, this was very like, let's do a survey monkey. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but are there better practices out there to understand the impact that your function is having on other elements of the business? And are there things that compliance, risk, security professionals should think about in terms of how they're managing their functions brand within an organization?
Absolutely. That's a great point. And I did mention earlier, I'm glad you brought it up. So we call that the like ICE, or internal customer engagement approach.
Oh, okay.
Um, so whether it's for compliance or analytics, like I was surprised, and when I've started at different companies, how you're an insights professional. Your job is to find out like what's going on for the company, around the company, or within it. And same thing with compliance. But yet we weren't asking our own clients how we were doing. Kind of weird.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
shouldn't we, like, if we're going to model this, wouldn't we want to start with ourselves
It's the
as a team?
cobbler's children, right?
Right. Yeah. So like go ask, and just, simple questions like, hey, much like the after action report, having a survey based on those 5 questions, or adding some depth, what worked, what didn't, did you find value in it? And that actually can become, it's an important source of insights. It's also a great source of the case for why you should exist. Because if you're saying, yeah, you guys, like, you helped us enable this thing, and we ended up getting 2 million of incremental net operating profit from that new idea that you helped, with an insight around, or with the compliance topic, we really prevented this thing that was almost going to happen. It didn't, and it saved us $500,000, whatever. Like, you just, collect those cases of, like, okay, by the way, here's the fact base to support our value to you, company. Give us 2 more analysts, right? So that's use it, ask the questions, and make it. You have to make it routinized, so monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, whatever, something that people are used to. Don't expect a lot of respondents to start, but over time, and ask people for their feedback. And there's something about it, like, even just asking people for feedback tends to boost engagement with them, even if it's bad news they're giving you to start. Like, at least you're asking them, and I
Yeah.
think that's an important point. So highly recommend that ICE approach, internal customer engagement call, whatever is going to work for your company, just to get feedback from your customers and how you're doing.
Well, that's terrific. So, the last question that I have is, at MentorCore, we're very focused on the importance of mentoring relationships throughout a person's career. We always ask the question, what is the best advice that you have ever received from a mentor?
Oh, that's a great question. I love that question. And the best for me, it's about, it was actually when I was working at Bank of America, kind of early in my career, kind of first kind of team leadership, small team role. And this particular person ended up not, being probably my best manager I've had. It was okay. I've had some really great managers, and that's been obviously formative for me. Lucky in that respect, for sure. But he said, um, there's no limit on credit. And what he meant by that wasn't a bank term. He meant, like, if you do a project for somebody, it's not a zero sum game. It's not like this pie, like, that you get a certain percentage of. It actually grows the pie. Like, if you're doing something and you're giving credit to someone else, they're more than likely highly appreciative of that, and they're going to tell 10 other people about the great work you did for them, and it scales out the impact of your work. So that's something I've taken to heart, and it was honestly that's been a challenge for me, because a lot of the places that I've worked, starting with the intelligence community, like, if you do something good, no one can know about it, right? Or you can't say, well, like, there's this whole, like, we're helping someone else get the credit for it. But at the end of the day, that's a great thing. Like, as long as folks know you're a trusted advisor and you're essential. And I think for all of us, analytics, compliance, like, we're not going to be the shiny, new sales or marketing or whatever digital
No.
team. Like, it's never going to be that, but that's okay. As long as we're appreciated by those folks, we'll be grounded. We'll get resources to what we need. We can continue to have an impact on our organizations. So no limit on credit is the best advice I've received, and it's actually it's been not always easy, but very good advice throughout my career.
Well, I love it. You will be quoted on that at a later date as part
Sounds
of
good.
our MentorCore Mentor Mondays. We
Awesome.
really appreciate you being here. I know that you're speaking
The best.
tomorrow night for the Minneapolis St. Paul Georgetown University Alumni Association, which is open to anyone who wants to attend, and that it'll be a more formalized presentation of some of the things that you do. We
Great.
really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom, especially in light of all of the expectations from the Department of Justice that all of our compliance friends are trying to adjust to right now.
That's awesome. Well, Lisa Beth and Daniel, thank you guys so much for having me be part of this, and I really enjoyed the great questions. I do want to lift up one thing I saw in the chat, which was from Mary, where she said that they do after action reports. And you mentioned this earlier, Lisa Beth, not only on things that go wrong, but also things that are working really well. And I would say that's so important. Like, there's so many learnings from things that it's not just about fixing or correcting things that didn't go well, but amplifying the things that are working. And whether it's analytics compliance, like that, so that kind of approach on both, incredibly important. And it's been a privilege to be part of the discussion, and appreciate everyone's time today.
Yeah, and again, thanks Mary for that comment in the chat. Mary is one of the co-hosts of the Great Women in Compliance podcast, and anybody
Awesome.
who hasn't listen to that, should give it a listen. They're doing some amazing things over there as well. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll look forward to our next two sessions. We have another celebration of Cybersecurity Awareness Month with Monique Maddox, a woman in cyber, next week. And the week after, we will be talking about predictions of the future for compliance, ethics, and risk with Matt Kelly from Radical Compliance. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Bill, and we'll talk again soon.